Welcome to our lecture, Living with Dementia as a Family Caregiver. As perhaps you already understand, dementia does not just affect the individual, but also the family, our communities, and society at large. In this lecture, we are going to examine who family caregivers are and some of the core tasks that they are responsible for. We will also examine the consequences of caregiving for families and what their needs are over the disease progression. Finally, we will talk about some of the principles for providing support and care to family caregivers. So let's start with who are family caregivers. Most people with dementia worldwide are cared for by one or more family members. And keep in mind that most people with dementia live at home for the course of the disease. We define family very broadly to include blood relative, friend, neighbor, fictive kin, and will refer to these people as family caregivers, although many times families themselves will not use the term caregiving because they see it as a natural part of their relationship to the person with dementia. So who are family caregivers? Most caregivers are still women in what has been referred to as in the middle. That means that these are women who are in their 40s and 50s. They're caring for an older relative or spouse with dementia. They may be employed, and they are also caring for children and/or others in the family with some kind of disability. Although most caregivers are women, the men are also caregivers. In the United States, for example, approximately 40% of family caregivers are men caring for their spouse, their siblings, or their mother or father. In the United States alone, there are over 15 million family caregivers, and these people are responsible for over 80% of the long-term care of people with dementia. That is a profound statistic. So what do families do? They are responsible for many different aspects, including coordinating care and transitions from doctor to home, nursing home, adult day, senior centers, making appointments and accompanying a person with dementia to doctor's visits, assuring the quality of life and that a person with dementia moves through daily routines safely. They're also responsible for medication oversight. That may mean assuring that a prescription has been filled, getting the prescription, and assuring that the regimen and timing of medications is provided accurately. Families also with disease progression begin to assist with what are referred to as instrumental activities of daily living, such as shopping, taking care of finances, doing all of the housekeeping, as well as with basic activities of daily living, such as bathing, grooming, and with disease progression and at the end of life, with eating. Families have to assure that the person is safe at home, and at the moderate to severe stages of the disease, a person with dementia may not be left alone safely. Families have to help with acute episodes and hospitalizations. This may include wound care. And they have to manage symptoms that are part of the clinical features of dementia and which have profound effects on individuals with dementia and their families. And that includes a wide range of behavioral symptoms, such as agitation and irritability and depression and apathy, as well as the slow decline in physical function. There are many costs of caregiving. Still, caregivers report various positive aspects to their role. For example, caregivers report that they have a renewed sense of purpose and improved sense of mastery about their abilities. Families also report a stronger sense of connectedness to other family members as well as to the person that they're caring for. Families report that giving back to their spouse or their sibling or their parents results in a positive sense of fulfillment. and these are positive aspects of providing care. Yet, we cannot underestimate that there are significant negative consequences that are emotional, physical health, social, and financial consequences that caregivers have to contend to in addition to the responsibilities that they assume. So families caring for a person with dementia have an increased risk of depression, depressive symptoms, and anxiety. They have an increased risk of having poor physical health and possibly experience injury, particularly at the moderate and severe stages when a family member may be responsible for helping the person with dementia transfer in and out of bed or on and off a chair or in and out of a bathroom tub. Families are also at increased risk of having to quit their job and experiencing financial burden. The financial burden of providing care to a person with dementia cannot be underestimated, but it is often overlooked. I share with you here some emerging statistics from a study using national probability sample. In the United States, it costs an average of $74 a day for an informal caregiver in terms of the time and costs associated with the person that has functional decline and behavioral symptoms. The total cost of dementia care over the lifetime of approximately 6 years, although we do know that people with dementia can live much longer, out to 20 years with this disease, is $282,436 US, which represents $49,000 per year of the cost of providing dementia care. Now let's take a look at some of the needs of family caregivers. I draw upon here a survey of families in the Maryland area in the United States. And of these 303 families, we found that 84% needed basic education about dementia and/or behavioral symptoms or other clinical features of the disease. 88% were in need of some kind of referral for specialty care or for respite. 45% had a clinically significant mental health need, such as anxiety or depression, and 24% had an unmet medical health condition. We can understand these needs as they relate to the changes that occur in a person with dementia, moving from mild cognitive impairment to severe stage. And as you see the different manifestations of the disease and needs of the person with dementia on the top row, you'll see the bottom row, the needs that family caregivers need. Even at a preclinical and mild cognitive impairment stage, families begin to know that something's wrong, and they begin to experience anxiety, a sense of burden and depression, and they need skills training to support the cognitive function of the person that is beginning to experience these changes. At the early to the moderate stage, families are taking on more and more roles, such as assuring safety, and therefore they have many unmet needs, such as ongoing education. They need skills to manage behavioral symptoms. And then at the severe or end stage of dementia, families continue to need a lot of support in order to understand how to manage end-of-life care and palliative care, and how to think about the impending death of their loved one and how they will resume various roles in their life. So the good news in dementia care is that we have wonderful evidence of a variety of programs that have been tested using randomized clinical trials, which is the most rigorous approach to deriving evidence to support family caregivers. In a recent review by myself and colleague Dr. Hodgson, we identified over 200 caregiver support programs that were tested in a randomized clinical trial, and that involved over 8,000 families. These these interventions can be categorized loosely as falling into these different kinds of categories. Those that provided professional support, such as access to respite, psychoeducation, though that is interventions that provided ways of coping and education about the disease, skills training to manage behavior and functional decline, counseling and psychotherapy to manage anxiety, family discord, and depression, self-care and relaxation techniques, and multi-component interventions, or those that involved a combination of these other types of approaches. These interventions have looked at their impact on a variety of outcomes, including whether they could improve a caregiver's knowledge, whether they could decrease burden, whether they can improve a caregiver's sense of confidence or self-efficacy in managing dementia. Also, these programs or interventions examined outcomes on psychological areas such as anxiety and depression. And they also looked at outcomes related to the person with dementia, such as whether the intervention had an impact on preventing or reducing behavioral symptoms, and also the time to institutionalization, or when a family member felt the need to place a person with dementia in a nursing home or assisted living or some other kind of living arrangement. So, what were the outcomes? Well, we find that for the most part, interventions can impact each of these outcomes very positively. Take, for example, the impact on reducing the burden that caregivers experience. We found that multi-component interventions, interventions that involve a variety of aspects such as education and skills training and positive coping strategies, can reduce caregiver burden, and we use an effect size to understand the strength of this outcome. And in this case, these studies that looked at burden, the effect size ranged from very small, 0.01, to 0.52, which is considered a moderate and acceptable effect size. Similarly, we can impact caregiver knowledge. Interventions that include a strong caregiver education component showed the largest effect, up to 0.51. We also know how to reduce the anxiety of caregivers. Interventions that had as one of its components, or sole component, relaxation training showed the largest benefit, from 0.16 to 0.50. Also, we can reduce depressive symptoms with psychoeducation approaches demonstrating the largest benefit. So, how can we best support families? It's important to know that given the complexity of the disease and that it occurs over a very long period of time, there is no one magic bullet. There is not going to be one pill or one therapeutic or one caregiver support program that can do it all. We need multiple approaches that are mapped to the needs of family caregivers and the stage of the disease. We must provide ongoing knowledge and skills, but as needed. And caregivers have preferences as to how they want to receive our information and skills and support. Some will prefer in-person, face-to-face in the home. Others may prefer a group format. Others will prefer technology or the use of a phone or a combination. It's also important to recognize that families need a lot of repetition of the same information and reinforcement of basic knowledge and skills. As the disease progresses, new information needs to be provided, and caregivers gain renewed insight as to the impact of the disease. In all of our approaches to caregivers, we must balance providing the just right amount of emotional support, recognizing the profound role they have and the toll it takes on them emotionally, as well as providing instrumental support. They both go hand in hand, and families need both our emotional support and our instrumental support. So we like to think about supporting caregivers in terms of a toolkit. And here are some basic ideas of what should be part of this toolkit for supporting caregivers. Obviously, first, providing information about the disease. Second, helping caregivers understand the implications of diagnosis for everyday life and the safety of the person with dementia, as well as helping families understand what a person with dementia can do and ways to support what they can still do, and also what they are now unable to do. As part of the toolkit, there are specific strategies that families can be taught to communicate effectively, arrange their environment effectively, to prevent and manage a wide array of behavioral symptoms, and also to help support the best physical function of the person. Families need strategies for a home safety. They need an understanding of how to conduct a home assessment to determine the safety level of their person with dementia at each of the stages of the disease. They also need very specific strategies for ways to find opportunities to take care of themselves, to exercise, to see physicians for preventive health care. They need strategies for juggling their multiple roles. There are also other aspects to a toolkit that we think are very important. As we mentioned, the financial toll of caregiving is great for all families, and so addressing the financial planning and thinking about residential options and care planning and coordination that will be needed immediately and into the future are all very important aspects of a toolkit for supporting caregivers. For many families, becoming an advocate with a healthcare system and helping to coordinate care is new. Also, advocating for the person with dementia in a wide array of social situations is also new. So providing strategies with support to be the best advocate they can be is important. We discussed also medical management, helping people with dementia manage medications. The complexity of various comorbidities are all very important. Finally, families need to have our emotional support and specific strategies for the loss that they continuously experience, and also immediately after a person with dementia dies, as this is a terminal illness, and many families need help understanding the bereavement process. Families also need a wide range of positive coping strategies and stress reduction techniques for caring for themselves, and of course, an understanding of resources. Many families do not even know the number for the Alzheimer's Association and or its helplines or helpful websites, and all of these become very important resources that families can use when they need it and on their own time. When we think of ways to approach families, we have to be cognizant of the fact that family caregivers are extremely diverse in terms of who they are, their values and beliefs, their financial and emotional resources, and their understanding of the disease. We think of caregivers and the best way to approach them in an intervention in terms of what we refer to as their level of readiness. So some families enter our programs, for example, with what we say is a very high level of readiness. They want to learn new strategies. They understand the disease process. They understand that the person's behaviors are not intentional and that it's up to them to change their communication strategies and the environment to support the person. Others, however, come at what we call a pre-action stage of readiness, and that is they're not really quite sure what the disease is about and how it impacts the person with dementia. They don't quite realize that they're going to need the changes in which they approach the person with dementia. You can see on this slide in one of our trials that 67% of the caregivers who entered our study were rated at a pre-action stage of readiness. That meant that we had to spend a lot of time providing basic education and helping the person realize that there are helpful strategies that can support their efforts, but that they will involve their changing their communication strategies and the way that they do things throughout the day. Importantly, we find that caregivers who are experiencing financial strain have a great deal of difficulty engaging in learning new techniques. And that is why it's so important to add to our interventions and our supportive services a component that addresses financial difficulty. We find, however, that those families who begin a supportive program at an action level, or who over the time period in a program move to an action level, do much better than those who do not. They report better benefits overall, less upset, more confidence, and actually less frequency of behaviors. So readiness is one of the characteristics, if you will, that families bring to our supportive programs, by which we need to tailor our approaches. So in conclusion, it's very important that we all recognize that families are in the forefront of providing care for persons with dementia. They are responsible for all of the long-term care. This involves assuming a very wide range of daily care tasks, and these tasks do not go along with the disease, go away with disease progression. Rather, they accumulate, and thus accumulates the burden that families frequently experience. Families are in need of our support. They need basic education about the disease and its impact on daily function. They need access to and knowledge about basic resources in a community. They need very basic strategies for caring for themselves, and to be reinforced that it's very important that they take care of themselves. Please note that without families, there would be no dementia care in most countries in the world. How we move forward to support families is one of the most critical public health challenges in dementia worldwide. Thank you.